Carlos, welcome to our WGC Explores series here. Your paper, Small Scale LNG Technology Applications Case Studies, was selected in our call for papers. I'm very familiar with it as I was on some of the committees selecting papers for the conference. And timely topic back then, and it's a timely topic today. And you also spoke, if I recall, 2 sessions at the World Gas Conference, which is outstanding. I attended both of those sessions, again, because this topic is such keen relevance to what's going on in international LNG trade. I'd like to do 2 things today. One is to catch up with you professionally, what you're working on, what your priorities are at your company. And then secondly, we're going to revisit the World Gas Conference of 2018 and talk about your experience there, that other people may listen to you and say, hey, that's interesting. I'd like to participate in that conference. I'd like to, I've done some interesting work. I'd like to submit a call for papers, et cetera. So why don't we just begin right now and get right into the questions here. I would very much like to hear what you're working on today. Have your main role changed at the Bureau Veritas headquarters there in Paris? What are you focusing on? I mean, this pandemic has kind of turned the world upside down, especially the energy markets. So catch us up. What's happened in the last couple of years?
Well, thank you for the introduction. Indeed, well, I am having the same role in the company in Bureau Veritas and the headquarters in Paris. I am global market leader of gas carriers and tankers, and in my role, I am following up most of the developments on the LNG market in particular, shipping developments more specifically because I am in the marine and offshore division of the company. Well, basically in the last years, I would say 3 years since we participated in the World Gas Conference in Washington, we have seen in particular that the business of LNG is moving very, very rapidly with a lot of evolutions, innovations, new ideas to access new markets. We are following up with many different companies and newcomers, and that's important because the LNG market has been, I would say, traditional market, but these days everything is evolving, and we have to follow up very closely all these type of innovations, new ideas for the distribution of LNG. And in fact, the 2 topics that I have addressed in this World Gas Conference in Washington in 2018 are hot topics still today, of course, in LNG small scale, for instance, and in the floating regasification segment. We have continued working on the classification and certification of projects like this, but of course they are changing a little bit with new ideas, new concepts, especially import terminals, floating import terminals are evolving, and we have been able to class some more units. Gas to power, also integrated gas to power projects, all floating, with production of electricity also in a barge, in a power barge, is something that we are involved in. And in a smaller scale in particular, there are new concepts on distribution with containerized ships, basically. So that's, I think, the new evolution of the two markets that they have seen in the last, I would say, couple of years.
Back in 2018, as you noted, you did lay out what was going on with the small-scale LNG technology and floating LNG concepts. And that's, this is a very rapidly evolving energy market. Have there been any technological developments in these 2 areas in the last 2 years?
Yeah, well, in fact, what has been reality now is, for instance, in a smaller scale distribution, in particular in the LNG bunkering, in the LNG as fuel for maritime industry. Now we have seen that technologies like a membrane, GTT membrane, is becoming a reality with projects in US, for instance, with a small barge built by Conrad Shipyard, but also with bigger units, actually ocean-going ships that are in operation very recently in Europe. 1 ship has been delivered this year with almost 19,000 cubic meters of LNG cargo tanks with membrane technology. So it's more an adaptation of the technologies that have been used for shipping LNG It's more an adaptation than actually a new technology. But there are other aspects, for instance, reliquefaction systems or subcooling units that also have been installed on these LNG bunkering ships that are, again, a sort of innovation and adaptation to a smaller scale that are helping the industry to develop further. And the example again is the Conrad unit with the Stirling subcooling system, or the MOL LNG bunkering ship with the air liquid subcooling systems that are specifically designed for this type of ships, for LNG bunkering.
That's a very different market for that. Bunkering has been of great interest around the world, especially in Asia. And obviously these technologies can play a role in these bunkering. How is that developing?
Yeah, well, I think LNG bunkering for maritime industry is in evolution continuously these days. We see there are many projects that will be implemented in Singapore, for instance, or the Far East. There are projects under construction basically in many places in the world, in China, Japan, Korea, also in Singaporean yards, and in Europe. And I think the only region that is a bit behind the developments in LNG bunkering is the Middle East. But I think there are huge companies over there that are addressing these days also the business of LNG bunkering, and they will develop something very quickly because they have already natural gas. They are exporting LNG. So they just need to make, again, an adaptation of the shipping into LNG, small scale LNG bunkering, etc.
Which companies you see as the market leaders in developing these bunkering terminals and this network around the world?
Well, there are many, in fact, but I think import terminals are working on small scale development. We have seen, for instance, in Europe, many terminal developers, Gate in Rotterdam or Grain terminal in UK, also French terminals, Dunkirk, for instance, has adapted one of the jetties for a small scale. Spanish terminals with Enagas, they have already studied the LNG bunkering, and they are preparing, in fact, in some of the terminals already, Cartagena, Barcelona, etc. There are developments everywhere in Europe. You have seen possibly also OLT Toscana will be also able to deliver ship-to-ship for a small scale in Italy. So I think there is no terminal in the world, especially in North Europe and potentially in other parts of the world, that is not addressing specifically the future developments on a small scale, the ability to also to deliver small parcels of LNG for this new business, and especially the fuel, the bunkering fuel hubs that I mentioned already in the Far East, in the Middle East, specifically in locations like Emirates or eventually Oman or Qatar. That's a new business for them, but I think they will succeed also on that.
It seems that any country with a coastline can now have access to LNG. I mean, this is a far cry from 10 years ago, when we were talking about, very large multi-billion-dollar gasification facilities and then multi-billion-dollar regasification facilities. So that's pretty exciting in that respect. And you look at your market work that you do you see this as going to be the key driver of the LNG market growth in the future, the smaller scale facilities? Or you still think we're relying on the very large base load, large gasification and regasification facilities?
Oh, well, of course, it's a very good question. When we are talking about LNG, the LNG is a huge market at the moment, is growing a lot. And we are, in fact, using the LNG for power production in many places of the world. So the maritime use of LNG for fuel is, at the end of the day, something that is small compared to the global business. I think the amazing developments on a smaller scale and the technological advance on a smaller scale are interesting, but the core of the business is still today and will still be the global shipping and the big terminals, export and import terminals. Because indeed we have many developments in different regions, the US terminals that are still under construction, some of them, other terminals in Canada, for instance, Mexico as well, that has taken at least one FID recently for Costa Azul. We have also the Russians that will develop all these Arctic projects in the future. The expansion of the Qatar gas production of the North field expansion. So there are many, of course, producers of LNG that will be focused and will be involved in the shipping part. That is also an important business for Bureau Veritas. I was, of course, addressing the topics that I have introduced in the World Gas Conference in Washington 2018, but indeed the LNG market is more than a small scale and FSRUs, for instance. A small scale and FSRUs are niche market still today and is a small part of the regasification capacity. But for instance, FSRUs is over 100 million tons per annum of importing capacity. But of course, we need to be realistic. Not all the ships that are available in the market with regasification installations on board are able at the moment to be moored on one port or installation and to regas gas for importing into the natural gas grid or into gas to power production and things like this. So, but this is still a small part of the total business at this moment.
Well, compared to a year ago, though, how much of this current economic conditions worldwide slow things down, and when do you see things turning around?
You mean in the new environment this year with the COVID? Yeah. So, well, in fact, there has been for all the markets, not only for LNG, a big decrease in demand. And we have seen, of course, the price of oil going down dramatically because of the balance between demand and production and the OPEC meetings that are taking place also this week. In order to adjust this, I think, of course, the LNG market has been impacted, but the reality is that LNG is not only, I would say, a transition fuel for a few years' time from now. I think it will last for many years until we can find some other fuels, clean or decarbonized. So I think in any case, I think for next year we will see some recovery in the market slowly, but I don't see LNG market is at risk because in fact many of the power installations in the world are going to be converted from coal to liquid fuel and then to gas. In many places, not only in well-developed countries, but also Southeast Asia, for instance, is changing their mind, and also African countries are looking at LNG as gas, as a clean fuel for the production of electricity. There are many countries in Africa that are looking at this solution, like Ghana, which is going to be importing LNG very soon. Mozambique also with gas to power solutions, and many others. So I think LNG in this case is not at risk. COVID, of course, has caused some troubles. And we have seen also delays in the exports from the US, for instance, in the terminal developments and things like this. But I think in mid-term and long-term, the industry is developing quite nicely. Yeah.
You mentioned standards, ISO standards, et cetera. I do a lot of standards work here in the US on energy, whether it's battery storage or whatever. And, you know, it always seems if you can come up with international standards, ISO, whatever, it actually helps the market grow, in that everyone is working from the same page. Again, you did mention this. Could you tell us a little bit about what's happening in the standards area, especially for the bunkering and this development?
Yeah, well, indeed, there have been at least two new standards on bunkering very, very recently. One is addressing the couplings for the LNG bunkering, for LNG as fuel. is the standard 21593 that has been released, I think, this year, in fact, very, very recently. Of course, standards are standards. Not all the manufacturers will potentially, in short term, be able to comply with these documents. But I think it's a good move in the future in order to have a good understanding of the requirements for the design and manufacturing of couplings, which is one of the most important aspects on the LNG bunkering, of course, to prevent that there is any issue of leaks of LNG, for instance. There is another standard also in relation with LNG bunkering, but more linked to the quality of the LNG that is being transferred on LNG as fuel projects. And this standard is very fresh. I think it's just about 1 or 2 months old only, but it's not addressing specifically, I would say, couplings or any other equipment on the transfer system of LNG bunkering ships, but is more about the quality of the LNG that is being bunkered. But it's again very important for the industry, because at the end of the day, when you are bunkering LNG, you have to actually know what is the energy that you are transferring to the ships. The energy that you are paying for is something very important for the clients. And then the components of the LNG that you transfer into the ship are giving you this, I would say, heating values or characteristics of the energy that you have on board. So that's another good standard that has been developed in the last months.
That's we've talked about, most people think about small scale LNG being on coast cities, import facilities, et cetera, and putting it into an existing pipeline infrastructure, a gas pipeline infrastructure. But in many places of the world, we're seeing LNG trucked inland from these facilities on the coast, and then regasified in towns and cities that are far from the coast. Have you had much experience with this use of the technology?
Yeah.
And have you looked at those markets?
Exactly. This is one field in the LNG small scale that we are following very closely, because there are projects on containerized distribution. There are already some in the world, of course, in US, for instance, also in Europe, in Portugal. There are small-scale distribution projects. For the time being, they are small. They are linked to small import regasification terminals for industrial applications, not for energy production on big scale or large scale. But these type of projects are gaining momentum because flexibility is one of the advantages. Basically, the ships that might be either a container ship and a standard container ship that is in compliance with an IMO code for dangerous goods, or specific ships that are under development that are designed for the only purpose of transportation of containers, or 40 or 20 feet. Most of the time we are talking about 40 feet containers to be offloaded to a truck, for instance, or eventually in some applications that's very interesting, and we actually approve some concept designs of ships that are based on containerized distribution, but able to take also the cargo of LNG from a terminal. So with the connections, links between containers when they are on board of the ship, delivering the bunkering or the LNG amounts from small scale terminals or large scale terminals. There are projects under discussion in many parts of the world. In UK, for instance, we are aware of one of these. So these type of projects will be evolving rapidly in other countries like Southeast Asia and Indonesia, for instance, that they are discussing, or India. Inland navigation, of course, with containerized solutions might be also another alternative for distribution into the roads with barges or a small vessel that are able to go into the inland navigation into the country.
It sounds like you're working on a long list of projects.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Which one are you most excited about?
Well, I think there is no single project at the moment in LNG that is not interesting, I would say, because all of them are covering a wide scope of innovations, new ideas. Sometimes these projects are not fully covered by regulations, and this is something we have to address carefully, because class societies can provide also regulations that are not international, but may also ignite discussion at the IMO level in order to approve new designs in the future of concepts, as we have discussed, of containerized solutions or inland navigation or many others.
Right. I understand you're working with the IGU on a report next year on projects in small scale LNG and floating regas. Can you tell us a little bit about this project and when we can expect to see it completed?
Well, yes, indeed, our project or our study group in the IGU, in the LNG committee this year, is addressing a mix of innovative projects at the end. It's called Integrated LNG Consumer Project. And there are some projects that are dealing with a small scale, including LNG bunkering. There are some others that are integrating floating projects, import terminals, and power barges using natural gas as fuel. It's a very complex, I would say, topic, because the variety of the different type of projects that we are talking about, the case studies that we are addressing, are very different one from each other. And I think the report will be ready on time, hopefully, I think in the coming months. It's already completed. In fact, we have already like a set of 60 pages delivered with a nice group of people from different aspects of the industry and different countries. And I think it's a good continuation with the last report. It's an update in some cases talking about the floating industry, marine applications, and other small scale industries, etc.
Just an aside here, how has this pandemic impacted your company and your work? In general terms, but all of us are impacted differently. How has this changed things for you in the company?
Yeah, well, I think we have in our company a main challenge for the inspections, more than for people involved in business developments like me. For inspectors, surveys and this type of things, of course, COVID has impacted quite a lot, because in some occasions these inspections have to be postponed or eventually propose an alternative means of inspection with remote means, maybe video conference in some cases, maybe the utilization of drones eventually, or visual means with the crew on board of a ship that is delivering actually the information by email and the images or video or photos also during a conference call or other means. So it has been very challenging, in fact, for the classification society, but I think we are doing nicely. We are, I think, responding the challenge properly with nice tools. And I think people really engage with the ship owners, in fact, to provide alternative means of inspections. All the technologies are working properly these days, so we are happy that we at least have an alternative to offer to the clients to continue with the certification and classification role of our company. And in fact, we have evolved a lot because we started already with discussions on remote inspections, eventually even before COVID. But because of the situation, actually all the tools and procedures have been evolving rapidly, and I think now we are prepared actually for any kind of eventual problem like this in the future.
You're a naval architect and oceanic engineer, correct?
Yeah.
Yet you're involved mostly in commercial operations. How have you made the transition from an engineer to commercial side of the business? I mean, I was in project development for many years. There's always a tension. The commercial side wants the least expensive, cheapest, lowest cost project to bid in, and the engineers want to build it right and build a first-class facility?
Well, I think for me, it has been very easy, I would say, just because since the beginning of my career, I started to actually to be employed by a shipbuilder in Spain in my career. So when I leave the university, actually I joined this position in the production department and the project management department in this shipyard in Spain. But immediately after I joined the commercial department. Well, first of all, it was the technical and budgetary department producing the calculations for the commercial department. So in close cooperation again with the sales and commercial division or the department of the shipyard. So I have been actually very linked to business development during all my career. I think it's my role actually. I am now in a classification society that is, you have to, of course, to deal with many technical challenges and many technical documents and things like this, especially linked to regulations, and not only class regulations, but international IMO documents, etc. That is very important for us. And well, actually, I think for me, it is not a big headache or transition from the naval architecture world and to the commercial world.
Let's shift gears and turn the clock back a couple of years. Now, what were your impressions about the World Gas Conference in Washington, D.C. in 2018 and the time you spent there?
The conference hall were really amazing. I think one of the best conferences I have ever participated, in my opinion. So my overall impression was very nice. On top of that, I have the feeling also that in terms of networking opportunities, we had plenty of meetings, plenty of opportunities to meet people, the lunch, in the cocktails, in the evenings, and all the program was very well organized. So I think all the main companies that I wanted to meet were there in this event. So I think I got really 99.9 satisfaction with the World Gas Conference in Washington.
You've successfully participated in the call for papers, and obviously, paper was selected and you participated in the sessions. Do you have any observations about that experience?
I think an overall impression also for me is that the process of selection, the call for extract and everything was very smooth, very, I could say, smart. I didn't have any big issue on that. On top of that, I have to mention that in particular, World Gas Conference is one of the few events where you have actually the theater, the technical theater in the exhibition area, where many of the people that actually are just visitors or exhibitors are able to attend the presentations. And this is something that is not happening in many other conferences, so it's, I think, a good idea that this is happening. So I think overall feeling is again very, very good in general. In terms of industry inside conferences, again, I feel that the organization was pretty good, and I didn't have any big issue, of course, during the presentation and the participation on these sessions. I think as an average, my feeling is that everything went very smoothly and very nicely for all the delegates.
So if you were going to submit a paper for the 2022 conference, what would the topic be?
I think so. I mean, of course, we will have some more time to think about, I would say, very interesting topics. It's not so easy sometimes to think what is the right topic for the audience. But I think we will find actually a new topic for next World Gas Conference, of course, as we are doing in the last couple of meetings, because I participated also in the 2015, actually. Yeah, so I think I will be pleased to submit at least one or two abstracts for the new edition.
Look forward to receiving those. Look, Carlos, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I'm sure by next year we'll turn the corner, travel will resume, and you and I our paths will cross again.
Yeah, very pleased. you very much again. Same for you, everyone. Please keep safe, and hopefully we will meet each other in the coming future.